Good morning. This is Easter Sunday morning, and we're going to be looking at the crucifixion through the eyes of Peter. And this is based on Matthew, the 26th chapter, starting with the 17th verse. This is, like I said, Jesus' death and resurrection as seen through the eyes of, like I said, the disciple Peter. And so it was this Peter's in his eyes, and he was. It was the first day of the feast of the unleavened bread, and some of us asked Jesus about where we would eat the Passover. But he sent two of us into the city and gave us directions, uh, what to do and how to prepare it and how to obtain a place, an upper room for the Passover. In the evening, we met and came together, Jesus and the 12 of us. And Jesus told us that this would be the last Passover that he would eat until his kingdom be established. And we all were kind of bewildered and wondered at what he was trying to say. But he continued to speak to us and saying that one of us would betray him. And he also said it was the one that did, it would be better that uh, he had never been born. And so we all became, like I said, bewildered, and we all began to ask the question, Lord, is it I? Is it I? And then he took the bread and the wine, and he blessed it, and then he gave it to us, and he said to us to take this bread, and this is my body, and that the wine was his blood, and he passed it to us, and we all eat and drank. And then he said all would forsake him uh, before the night's end. But I thought, how can this be? We've been with him for 12 years. I mean, for 3 years, all the 12 of us. How can it be that one of us are that we're all going to forsake him before this night is over? We've seen all that he's done. How can? So I spoke up and I told him that I declared that I would stand with him, that I would die with him if I even the need be. But he just looked at me, kind of with that compassion of it in his eyes, and he said, looked at me and said, Peter, uh, you'll deny me 3 times before the cock crows. And again, we all pledged our oaths to stand with him, that we would not fail him, we would not lay him down, but that we would stand with him and not turn away from him. And then he took us out to the garden. But then he went ahead and he took James, John, and myself, took us a little deeper into the garden. And he told us to watch while he went and prayed. And then he came back, and we had all fallen asleep. And he looked at me and said, could you not watch with me for 1 hour? And then he told us to watch and pray as he went back into the garden again. And then he returned again. Again, we'd all fallen asleep. But he told us to go ahead. He told us to rise, that he who had betrayed him was at hand. And while he spoke, the multitude of soldiers and Judas came up and said, Hail, Master! And Judas kissed him on the cheek. And the unalarmed Jesus spoke and said, Friends, why have you come? And they grabbed him and bound him, and he knew what was going on. And I drew my sword, and I cut the ear off of one of the soldiers. But Jesus rebuked me and told me to put my sword away. And then he healed the man's ear. They seized him, and while they were seizing him, then we ran. We ran. Instead of standing and going with Jesus and following after him or standing with him, we all became cowards. And we ran in all of our different directions, afraid that they would take us and arrest us too, put us in the prison. So, but yet I came back and I followed a distance behind. I just wanted to see what was happening, and where they would as they took Jesus to the palace. And I sat outside, and as I sat outside the palace gates, just trying to listen and find out what was going on with Jesus, there was a woman came up to me and said, "You're one of his." And I said, no, ma'am, I'm not. I'm not one of his. I'm not one of his followers. And then another came by and said, I know you. I saw you with Jesus. You're one of his disciples. And I became more angry. I said, no, I'm not one of his. I don't know this man. I'm just here trying to get my hands warmed by your fire. And so then just a minute, another came saying, hey, you're one of his. You're one of his. And again, I became even more angry. I said, no, I'm not one of his. I don't know this man. I've not been a part of him. And no more had I said that till cock crowed. And then I remembered what Jesus had said to me. And I was sorrowful because I knew that I had failed Jesus. I knew that I had let him down. After all my bragging, after all that I said and how that I would stand, I had failed. I had failed. And I went and I repented. I was so sorry of what I'd done to Jesus and how I failed him. And then the next morning, they took him before Pilate. And Pilate said he couldn't find anything wrong with Jesus. He couldn't find any fault that he had done. But the Pharisees, they kept insisting that that he had done wrong, that he had blasphemed, that he had claimed to be the king of the Jews, and all these things. And so they kept insisting that something be done. So they took Jesus and they beat him 39 times, 39 stripes. But see, they weren't satisfied yet, though, so they took him back to Pilate again. And so Pilate said, well, I told you I find no fault with this man. So here's two that I'll give you. You have a choice. You make the choice what takes place. Here is this Jesus that you say is that you want me to, you've beaten him and you have done all these things to him that you want him to, me to take charge over him. Yet here's one that has walked among you that's a thief and a murderer. His crime, his guilt has been proven. We know who he is. We know what he is. Which one do you want me to release? One of these I'll release to you today, and then I'm through. I wash my hands of the whole thing. And so I said, and Pilate asked again, who do you want me to release, Jesus or Barabbas? And the crowd began to holler, Barabbas! Barabbas! Give us Barabbas! So Pilate, distastefully, he released Barabbas and turned and washed his hands, because he still said he could find no fault with him that was worthy of death for Jesus. So he turned him over to them and said, take him. Take him. And so he turned, like they turned Jesus over to the mob, and the next thing I saw was Christ, Jesus carrying his cross toward Golgotha. He looked like he was barely alive. There was a man there called Simon, and he came out and he helped Jesus bear the cross. When everybody else ran, Simon came out to help Jesus carry the cross, not wondering or caring for himself, but he helped Jesus bear the cross to Golgotha. And they took him to the cross and they nailed him to it, and then they stood it up, and the mob and scorned him as it was near evening. I don't know how he stood it, but finally he died, and then they still wasn't satisfied. They stuck a spear in his side, and out came water and blood. But after confirming that he was dead, they took him down, and there was one of the priests, which was a surprising thing. But one of the priests came up because we didn't know where we was going to do with the body. But one of the priests came up and said that he would give his tomb for Christ to be buried in. So we took him to the tomb, and I saw him close it and put a seal on it, and they even posted a guard by it. And then I went back to the upper room that night, and a few days later, early one morning, it was the first day of the week, Mary came to the door, uh, and she was saying, "Jesus' body's gone. His body is gone." And so we went out, and all was gone. The stone was rolled back. The tomb was open. The only thing was left there was just the grave clothes that they put on Jesus when they buried him. And I looked in, and there was a man in white saying uh, to us that Jesus had risen, and that he would meet us in Galilee, and for us to go to Galilee uh, to meet him. And so we went back, and we started there, and we did. We went back out, and we stood there, and we started out again by Galilee, and some of us went out to fish, and then we realized that while we were out there, we looked back on the shore, and we saw a man. And we thought it was somebody we knew, and as we got closer, we realized that it was Jesus. It was Jesus. He's alive. And he said, telling us he had fish and bread, and he told us to come by the fire, and he told us to come and eat. And oh, what a reunion! Knowing that our Savior is alive. The one we followed is alive. He lives. He lives. Just as he promised that he said he would rise again. That he would rise again. He kept his word. We failed in ours because we ran and hid. But Jesus kept his word. He kept his word. Jesus never lets his word down. But when he says whatever he says, it will come to pass. As we saw during the miracles that he did, time and time again. But we couldn't get it in our heads that when it came down to the end, and to the battle, or to the fight, that he would survive. He would win. He would not be defeated. And he stood it. But he stood it alone because we ran. But he still loved us and said for us to come because he had prepared, like I said, a meal for us and for us to be joined again. And oh, the time that we had there with him by the shore of Galilee that on that evening.